conducted in Uganda 1 to 2 years ago. I will go through this experiment and take this as a case study for the overall topic that is addressed here in this afternoon session. So the case of Uganda, interestingly, it's one of the poorest countries in the world, but it's one of those few countries which tries to implement a strategy of bringing financial literacy to the people. So they really have a financial literacy strategy for many years now. It's not perfect, and there are not perfect institutions in such a country, but still they aim for improving the level of financial literacy, which you can imagine is quite low in such a country which is in general also lowly educated, or the population is often lowly educated. It's organized by the Bank of Uganda, the central bank, who is the coordinator of various kinds of activities that take place. And this program of the Bank of Uganda is supported by the German institution, GIZ, and we were in contact with the GIZ, and so it came to the case that we were involved in one of these elements here. So in general, the Bank of Uganda has training material, they have a variety of courses, they bring their educational efforts to firms, to schools, universities, so there's a lot of activities ongoing in that country. There's a variety of trainings, and our case here is just highlighting or is just focusing on one of these many trainings. So it's not really that training in the country, it's one of those who take place. And this training is just 2 hours long. It's quite short, should keep this in mind. It has pros and cons. I mean, it's obvious if you have just 2 hours, it's close to nothing. When you think about the full curriculum at school or at universities, the advantage is that you have higher power if you want to spread it out in the countryside. I mean, this is a poor country. They cannot finance thousands of teachers who just educate or bring financial education to the people, so there is also some need for trying to focus on the most important elements. I admit that 2 hours is really little, but still, let's see what happens here in this case. So the content of this course is conventional. So this university, people who are active there in cooperation with the GIZ and the Bank of Uganda, they have developed a curriculum which is identical in content. So it's identical in time, it's identical in content, but it's different in the delivery method, and they call it the Financial Literacy Ring, for whatever reason, but it's a nice name, FLiP, Financial Literacy Ring. And this is now particular in the sense that they focus on active or interactive learning instead of direct instruction. And what we do now is that we try to evaluate the effectiveness of this different delivery method. So same content, same people, but a different way of delivery. And this is one contribution we want to make in trying to improve the effectiveness of financial education. So we want to find out whether the one or the other method matters at all, whether they could be effective or not. What we know from the literature is that the effectiveness of financial year, we're trying to figure out whether their behavior has changed in the one or the other way. So what we have done, I mean, this is more a side remark, we have slightly revised the trainings to make them as comparable as possible. I mean, this is necessary, otherwise it's not a good experiment in practice. And if you develop something, it changes force, and then maybe you get different, let's say, if you have a training, this training covers, in our case here, 5 dimensions, which is typical for these kind of countries. So when you look at the curricula that have been developed by the ILO or the World Bank, they have similar topics, so personal financial management, loans, savings, investing, and other products, service products. So this is, and we have to make sure that we really spend similar amount of time for each of these topics and deliver the same kind of content. So this is our contribution here to make it as precisely comparable as possible. And the last aspect I haven't mentioned so far is that we also use the same trainers who deliver both treatments. So let's say in the one village, this certain trainer is delivering or is teaching that it's treatment A, and the next village is teaching treatment B, so that you don't have a trainer effect. So this is how we do it. This is a general setup. They use some material. The material is here to the left. I'm sorry for that. So there's a flip chart. And this flip chart has some pre-produced material and uses this flip chart to 5 stations. That's why they call it probably a ring. So people walk from one station to the other one. And at each of these stations, they have to somehow to fill in this curriculum here. So it's not that it's all pre-produced, but you have some material, and the trainer here is the woman, and you see that she has some cards in her hand. So these are the topics, this is one way how it is done, these are the topics that are discussed with the group, and then you put in whatever the group thinks should be the one or the other card in the one or the other place. So just to give you a rough idea how it works. So it's not that the teacher is doing it and allows for some questions, but it's that the group, these are typically, let's say, 12 to 15 persons, that this group gets into discussion with the teacher and with itself, and they make a decision where to put these cards to. So that in the end they get a complete topic. So they have men that are taught, but in effect it's 80% women that are taught. These are vendors in the rural area in Uganda, and these are typically women and not men. So what do we do here? We have these 1,290 individuals. It's in Western Uganda. We are active in 83 markets. So basically you go to these markets which have been selected by a specific procedure, and then you have a list of persons on these markets, then you randomize on these persons to address those persons and try to avoid any selection effects. And then what you do is that you randomly allocate these markets to these specific treatments. And the idea is that the only difference between these 3 groups is that they are randomly selected to the treatments. But otherwise, it should be always the same kind of persons. There should be always get the same kind of contact, same kind of teachers, procedures, and so on. Otherwise, you get unintended effects possibly from whatever. So you could have unbalanced groups, for example. What you find, if there is any difference in the treatment when you come back after half a year and you measure what has happened to these groups, if you find any differences, they interpret it as a causal effect. So the idea is everything is the same, and then you measure the behavior after some time. If behavior has changed in the one or the other way, you would say because I have introduced before. This is the timeline. So if you do this, you have a pilot, it's markets to the same persons, and try to figure out what has changed. Here you get some information about these groups. So we have here the information about the markets. So we do not always cover the same persons anymore. When you look at the individual level, the baseline here is 1,291. In the follow-up, it goes down to 1,001. It could be, for example, and this is the problem that we have in our study here, it's not very large, this sample. It's not so easy to find any significance here in such a small group. In particular, as we cannot take just all the people into the sample, but we have to control for the fact that there are similarities within marketplaces. So statistically speaking, we have a clustering here at the marketplace, and that means we lose a lot of degrees of freedom. We just have, in a sense, 83 observations, which is quite little. But still we see, if we look at treatment A, we find some of these stars. So here we can say we have a positive and statistically significant effect of this training, even though it's just a 2 hours training under these circumstances that you have seen, but there happens something with the people. If you look at the direct instruction, you see it's also usually positive, but the coefficients are smaller, and because they are smaller, they are not significantly different from 0. Or 0 means